Hi everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today I have a wonderful guest with me, Pye Nyunt. He is the Head of Insight and Innovation at London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. One of the topics that we have explored less on this podcast is the role of data, analytics, insight, technology indeed in local authority in the UK, or public sector as a whole actually. We haven't done a huge amount on that. And of course, local council, local authority, local government has had a really tough, challenging year dealing with the pandemic. Resources and focus and attention focused on supporting the most vulnerable in local communities. So I'm really pleased to have with me Pye to help talk through data more generally within local government and what he's been up to over the last year and more. So Pye, welcome along to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, you too. Okay, so do you want to introduce yourself, if you can, to our wonderful audience?
Yes, thanks, Jason. My name's Pye, and I, for the past 4 years, have been Head of Insight and Innovation at the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. It's an East London local authority that serves a population of about 213,000 residents, and I have the privilege of leading a team of data scientists, behavioral scientists, and service designers. And our mission statement is turning data into insight-led action.
Brilliant. I was really worried for a second you'd say turning data into insight with a full stop, but I'm very pleased that you continued with led action, which I think is the thing, right? That's
the most important word.
It's the most important word. I love it. Now, of course, it's interesting because government, not so much in the last few years. I mean, it's ripe for innovation and digitization. Basically, I think there's a lot of services. There's so much that you guys do, both as I say, central and local, but particularly local. There's so many. I mean, you're basically 15, 20 different companies within
Absolutely,
one
yes.
company.
Yes.
So there's so many opportunities, and as a citizen, you interact with the council on a day-to-day basis, even if you don't really think about it in that way. So the challenge must be A, vast, but B, the opportunity must be really big as well for you guys.
Absolutely, and I think what's fascinating about working in local government is indeed that we're one organisation, but several business units in combined, and it all fundamentally comes down to what is the purpose of local government, and in my view, that's about enabling prosperity in communities, caring for those people who are in most need of it, and being a facilitator to place shaping in the environment. And that is such a broad range of projects and interventions that we can get involved with. But that comes with several challenges, because in local government, we've got a set of very clear public duty and legislation around that. So it's about being able to utilize insight, but also innovate within that particular frame. And that in itself comes with so many different challenges, but I, for one, have really, really enjoyed it, because our fundamentally our resident base is our customer, and when we see outcomes improving across the population, when we see individuals cared for better, that is what we're all in it for.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We talk about data can be used for some, frankly, exciting commercial opportunities, but
yeah.
That's selling us more T-shirts or selling us a companion yes. product for the thing that we just bought is, it's not the most valuable in the scheme of things. The most valuable thing we can do with our attention. So I think applying data to solve and help implement that mission that local authority has creates a better environment, create a society, better place to live. And
Absolutely.
so I can't wait to explore some of the things that you're doing then to make that happen. Before we get into some of those, because I want to focus most of this discussion around the kind of use cases and the kind of work that you and your team have done to
Sure.
support the council. But I think more broadly, I'd love to explore the role, just generally the role of data within local government, and sort of what are the biggest kind of wins, the biggest things that people can think about who are in local government, both as a citizen actually, and
Yes.
how it interacts with the council, and also obviously within the four walls of your team and the wider local authority. So yeah, so what's the kind of role? What's the point here of data within local government?
I think I'll start by using an example because several of my colleagues across the local government family have often asked, what does your data strategy look like, and what does your digital strategy look like? And the reality of the matter is, those are important products, but they can't sit outside of the purpose of local government in the first place. So how I quite often answer that is, if you look at our place shaping strategies, if you look at our inclusive economy strategies, if you look at our care and support, social care, participation with residents, you will those are key strategies and policies as part of the makeup of any local authority.
Yeah.
And if you were to read them, you would hopefully see a bit of my voice and my team's voice actually embedded within those strategies. So that's what I personally believe that's what data leadership in local government means. It's not about, or not just about, what does your tech architecture looks like. It's actually about, well, is a social worker enabled enough to make the best informed decisions that they can when they're looking after a vulnerable person, by bringing together data and insight that will help them in their professional judgment, not a substitute for their professional judgment. And it also means that across the population, are we even using data in the right way to measure the things that really matter to our residents? So I think where my mandate comes in 4 years ago was a brilliant piece of work done across the authority with residents in building our borough manifesto. And that was an engagement with thousands of residents about, what would they like to see in the borough? What do they like about it? What do they not like about it? How can the authority and its partners make life better for many people? And that exercise, and the data that we gathered through that exercise actually enabled us to design plans of action, and particular use cases that we felt, as people working in this space, gave us more motivation, because it was resident defined and resident led, and tackling some very complex things, multi-structural things that might not just be within the gift of a local authority either. So that certainly gave us a lot more energy and enthusiasm. And the last thing I think I'd say is that there's a reason why my job title is Head of Insight and Innovation and not Head of Data, because I believe that data is part of the formula that enables better outcomes and insight and innovation. It's not the only component of enabling that, and hence why my team is made up of more than data scientists.
Yeah, that's I think that's a good and important point. I think the word data does have connotations, as to be fair, does the word insight and innovation.
Yes, it does indeed.
But I know that the principle of what you're saying is that, and link back to kind of the role of data within local government, is this is about attaching yourself to the things that really matter within for residents and citizens actually, and the things that matter to residents and citizens should matter to you as a local council.
Yes,
And if they matter to the local council, then they should matter to you as an insight, innovation, and data team. And I think
absolutely.
if that sort of like, I don't know if this phrase is used in local council anymore, but golden thread from kind of like the
Yes.
measures to the initiatives and actions that you take. But that kind of link from what the residents say, which is ultimately your customer, to the work that you do, attaching those things together is really important, though.
Yeah, I agree, and I like to think that that's pretty clear in Barking and Dagenham. We've certainly made a lot of effort to ensure that. And the other important thing to note is as well is that what we have that is a different dynamic in local gov that you wouldn't see in other organisations. Some in even within the public sector is, of course, is we have a political tier of leadership. So it's not just the executive leadership within the council, but a political tier. And as an officer, it's important that we remain apolitical, but at the same time, it's important that a lot of the work that we do enables the vision and in some cases the kind of lobbying stance that our local politicians want to take place. So, for example, just earlier this week, I was showing a model that we've developed around looking at poverty in our borough to the cabinet members of our political leadership, and that's really important because it means that I and my team get the exposure to the councillors, but the councillors are our elected our elected leaders, so they are the voice of, they are the day-to-day voice of the resident. So that is a stakeholder those are stakeholders that are incredibly important to be successful in this space.
Yeah, you have got an interesting mix of stakeholders, haven't you? You've got your internal exec and sort of like wider operational and strategic team. You've got your of course, as you mentioned, your political leadership team, but you're also a London borough, so you're also part of London, and obviously London's part of of England. So you kind of got all these different layers of layers and concentric circles, I suppose, of where you fit into a wider ecosystem, which is improve England and the UK and wider. Does that present some? Well, I think that presents some unique challenges, but does that present some challenges that or more opportunity than challenge, if you like, in terms of how data insight and innovation indeed is thought of within what you do?
I think so. I mean, one of the challenge that's presented itself certainly over the last couple of years is that local authorities across even London, we don't have the same data standards, for example, and we don't necessarily use the same systems. And one of our flagship projects that we've become fairly well known for is developing a ward level social progress index, and that is about measuring key outcomes from social outcomes, environmental outcomes of our residents at a pretty local level, 17 wards in Barking and Dagenham. Right. And what's interesting as we've some of that modelling work has caught on across London and outside is when each of those local authorities have attempted the same. There's these kind of slightly different data tables and different approaches. Some authorities don't collect the same data as we do, and we don't collect the same data as they do. Some of the reference standards are different. So air quality, for example, has various different reference standards. Right. But actually, what brings it all together quite nicely is the acknowledgement that we do have different systems and data collection methods, but there's almost a singular framework in which we can all agree upon. That is, we're attempting to measure the things that matter the most to our residents.
Yeah.
So in that way, the challenge becomes a bit of an opportunity, but we've also just acknowledged that we acknowledge and accept it is a challenge, and that's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah. Yeah. How important is the interaction or collaboration, um, or just sort of handshake with your neighbouring boroughs? Does that, because obviously as a resident, people tend to know what borough they're in, but if you sometimes you can sort of be on one side of the street, the other side of the street in different boroughs. How important
Yeah.
from the way you operate and sharing and collaborating across the different London councils or outside of London, do A is in the sort of psyche, and B, practically speaking, happens sort of in terms of collaboration?
I think what the collaboration has been more enforced by the pandemic, actually. So our collaborative efforts around East London, but particularly because when you look at the health system, it's tiered across multiple geographies. So there there isn't a health system only for Barking and Dagenham. It covers Barking, Dagenham, Havering, and Redbridge. So actually, when we work with a particular tier and of particular data. So for example, there's a lot of talk. I mean, a lot of talk for probably at least a decade now about health and social care integration, and fundamentally that is about the fact that some of those customers are the same individuals seen by the NHS and seen by the local authority, and so one of the things that we did a couple of years ago was, well, what happens if we were to actually combine that data across multiple geographies, and what does that present us with? And because we were slightly on the front foot about that in the pre-pandemic world, I think that in itself has actually helped us with our response, because we had an integrated data set which covers the East London geography, and it gives us more opportunity to talk to Redbridge, Havering, and across the clinical commissioning group about the type of residents that we all see. You might be a resident of Barking and Dagenham, but you actually go to hospital in Redbridge or Havering, and that's I think there's more of an impetus on us all to make sure that in the post-pandemic world that continues. Because actually it's proven that it's a good thing, and by looking at the data across multiple tiers and geographies, it's enabled all of us to have a good response.
Great, what a nice positive story to come out of a challenging year,
Indeed.
which is great to hear. Sometimes forced collaboration then leads to unforced collaboration afterwards. So hopefully that carries on. Certainly if the value's proven, it's people are up for it, right?
Yes, and there's a phrase that Mark, one of our directors, uses, is that sometimes partnership working feels like it's the bureaucracy of being nice, and actually we want to move beyond that into real partnership working across the public service system. So local authorities have a lot to do with health, but also with policing and so on and so forth. So I'm very hopeful that that will continue post pandemic, and we've learnt the lessons.
Great. What are some of the practical examples then of where you've applied insight data innovation to some certain challenges within the council, either within the last year to help with the pandemic, or over the last 3-4 years that you've been there? Where some have been your biggest wins?
If I took you back to, I'll give a pandemic example. My 9th of March last year, the leader of the council, Councillor Darren Wadwell, he called me in 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. I got the message on a Sunday evening, and several of us around the table, and he said, it's likely the country is going to go into lockdown, and actually what we want to do is set up a service which is ultimately named Citizens Alliance Network, that where local volunteers, the social sector, the council, and others can come together to best support lots of vulnerable people. But what we need to know is who's going to be vulnerable. And going back to that kind of integrated health social care data set that we have with our clinical commissioning group, it's anonymized, so we're not aware of individuals, but we can do some modeling geospatially, at least to look at pockets where there might be clusters of people over the age of 65 who might be vulnerable or known to social care, for example, and where might a concerted effort to protect those residents be best placed. And even with a data set that is anonymized, you can still do a lot, and you can still do a lot to research something. So by 2 o'clock that same day, I was in front of about 40 volunteering social sector groups, showing maps of the borough where there's high levels of deprivation, high levels of health inequality, of an evidence base that we've had over the years, and where to really think about, well, who's located in that part of the borough that is highly deprived, and actually there could well be a COVID-related risk. And this was all before we actually had confirmed data from the government. And one of the things I've been quite proud of is when we did that modeling, just looking at deprivation data, for example, and we never really you can never quite put your thumb on exactly how many people are going to be vulnerable, but we projected something like 12,000 people in the borough might end up on a vulnerable list. We didn't even know what they would look like in the beginning. And about a month later, when we did get confirmed data from the government, we had 9,000 people on the list, and another I think it was 4,000 who actually self-reported as vulnerable. So we ended up with a list of about 13,000 in the end. So, we were 90+% there. We didn't know who they were, of course, but and that's because we don't have access to that data. But actually, just being able to say to multiple volunteering groups in the beginning, we're probably going to have to cater for about 12,000 people in the borough.
Yeah, from like a planning and management and response perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can get behind the volume.
You can get behind the volume. You don't know. It's going to take us a month to know who exactly those people are. But when we did get it, there was a little sense of relief that we've got the citizen-led network in place to potentially meet that demand. And that's something that I'm incredibly proud of, because that was from 9 a.m. 9th of March, Monday morning, to having a result and a forecast and a plan by 2 p.m. that very same day. Yeah, and that's the power when you can handle the data, and when you can, and people are willing to take it and use it and be like, here's a part of the borough that is really deprived, and actually we need to have some resources there. And that's people from the local church, the local mosque, the food banks coming together, all of those things, and it's guided by the insight.
That's fantastic. Great story. Congratulations on that, and pleased that helped the support effort. The thing that springs to my mind here is two main things. One, your preparedness in being able to do that work, and that takes time and effort and energy and focus and attention, and I'm sure some groundwork that you've done for the prior few years. And secondly, and probably related to that first point, is the level of trust that people have in the answer that was produced. Because it would have been easy for someone to say, there's no way it can be that high, or that sounds way too low, for no other reason than gut feel and previous experience in similar matters and stuff like that. So how much of what you were able to do in those, whatever it was, 6-7 hours, was because of the 2 or 3 years worth of effort you'd put in prior, building the team, getting your platform, having the right tools, and how much of that was just good knowledge of the data, good knowledge of the problem, good knowledge of deprivation, and you were just able to throw sort of muscle power at it for that day to get it right.
I think it's a balance of both. I certainly think that if the pandemic hit and I was 3 months into the job and all my team were new and fresh, we probably wouldn't have been able to come up with that. So we were prepared to a certain extent. But equally, it's also when we talk about data as well, we often steer towards quantitative, big data analytical work. But actually, we mustn't forget there are a lot of qualitative insights that our members provide us with, our voluntary groups provide us with, our social sector provides us with, and actually being very close to the heartbeat of the action, even from a in inverted commas sort of a quite corporate-y sense, so I'm in a corporate team in a town hall, but actually the data scientists and others in the team are really close to the ground. They're really close to the problems. They're able to come back and say, well, actually, and there's some interesting resources in that food bank over there where we also know that tallies highly with children who might also be on free school meals, for example. So that level of qualitative insight, plus going back to the quant work and going, well, how many kids are on free school meals? Oh, it is in that area. Maybe we need to put more into there because there isn't quite a plan around what's going to happen at half term, for example, which obviously played out nationally in the end. But I think that just puts us all on the front foot, and we're not. It puts us in a slightly better position than we knew nothing about our residents, nothing about our population, nothing about no qualitative insight, but importantly, just being very, very close to your councillors who are residents themselves and know their constituents well.
Yeah, well, that strikes me really well is how close to the action you are. That closeness to the problems that you're solving, and the ultimately the output of the service, if you like, is critical in data, and it doesn't happen enough. But also, you were invited to the table. I think that's the other thing that strikes me. That 9 o'clock meeting, you could have easily sort of got in other companies or councils, this could easily happen, which is you arrive at work at 9 o'clock that morning and get told this meeting's happened, and can you just go and do this analysis, and you're thinking, well, why and what and why wasn't I in the room? And so I think, again, I think that's testament, obviously, to the work that you've done, that you were invited to the table to contribute, and that's it. Then we've said that the output that you created was valuable, and then proven, which puts you instead for all the other stuff that's going to come down the line as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, there's more coming, I'm sure.
So keen to hear a non-pandemic example. Then, have you got a good example? You mentioned something earlier that you sort of said you're well known for. I don't know if you want to unpick that one or some other example.
Sure. Sure. Our social progress index, we launched in 2017. It brings together. It's an index of about 50 odd different social and environmental outcome indicators at a ward level, and it's part of a larger global initiative led by the Social Progress Imperative, who do the work across the globe, but at let's say high levels of geography. And actually, we basically took that methodology and did it at a hyperlocal level. And so one of the most recent use cases of that index, which we've been looking at, is what do community hubs look like? So the design of the future of the council being more intertwined with the community. Right. If we have assets that are underutilized, warehouses, children's centres, so on and so forth, what other services can we put in those community hubs that are going to be best used by the residents who are, I don't know, a 10-minute walk away? And the way that model was used was we looked at 50 plus indicators. We ranked the top kind of 5 most in need indicators, and we we presented a geospatial picture of, which ward has the highest level of homelessness applications, which ward has the highest levels of issues with domestic abuse and violence, which ward has the highest levels of crime, for example. And then you look at, well, what assets do we have in those wards? How do we better use our libraries? So libraries are no longer places where you just go and get a book. They're community spaces, which are safe, which enable digital inclusion for many of our residents. It enables there's mental health support there, all of those type of things, and actually that the product of that work has meant that we've been able to better plan which resources are going to be in each community hub, and indeed what are the best places to use, because if we see a ward where there's some really high acute need, maybe we should repurpose the library to have 10 or more resources in it, and or maybe the library isn't the best place. Maybe it's the children's centre. So that kind of place-based allocation of resources that is guided through data and insight, but also tested. What's also really important is there's a member of my team who's a behavioral scientist, and he leads a team of data science, service designers. Is that they're kind of piloting different models of delivery based on the data and based on the insight that we're producing from our social progress index, and they're testing that on the ground, and the service designers are coming back and saying, well, this could work well, this couldn't work well, we need to iterate this. And actually, so it isn't a universal every service is the same in different wards. It's based on what is the most high level of need. And there's a difference there between working in an agile way and being an organization that can exhibit agility. There's two different, I personally believe there's two different things there, and what we're trying to do is be an organization that can exhibit agility, so we can move resources, we can change the input and intervention as and when we need.
That's brilliant. I was going to ask about the service designers, so I'm glad you sort of went there, because that's not typical in data functions, insight functions, to have. I think it is more typical, though not many do. Certain behavioural scientists, I think that's more typical. But can you just talk through the role of the service designers? Are they desk-based service designers, or are they in the action, out in communities, some sort of hybrid of that?
Yes. So pre-pandemic, they're definitely out in the community. They still have their contacts and able to do things virtually now. But the whole model in the team is the data scientists are there to do a lot of exploratory data analysis, build models, think about how we can do things differently, but also expose insight which we otherwise wouldn't have known. That kind of package of work then sits nicely with our behavioral scientists and our service designers, because they can then begin to think about, well, if the data is pointing to these 3 issues that are actually causing these other 20 issues to compound, then what does a behaviorally informed outreach program look like, and what does and can we test that? Can we pilot it out? Can we either build a proof of concept, learn from that, and then come back to the organization and said, what we've learned from this particular small scale pilot is that these 10 things worked, these 7 things didn't work. But actually, if we were to make that into a part of business as usual, here's the kind of tools and the techniques that we need to use to make those 10 things better, rather than just focus on the 3 things that didn't work so well. So they are very much part of the action. They work well intertwined with the data scientists and some of the technology we use. But it's the reason why I believe it's important to have a team that is multidisciplinary under the banner of insight is because a lot of the the analytical tools that data scientists might produce, they're not. It might not be easy to just put them into production. What you need is a group of people who can take that into the practice.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that side of the team is immensely helpful.
Brilliant. No, really, really helpful insight into that. And it sounds like that works really well. I wanted to just finish up with, I've got about 1 billion more questions, but I'm going to finish up with just how the approach you've taken over the last 3-4 years of, or the work that was done before you arrived, actually, on how the council has got to this place where it gets data or insight. It gets that it needs to use it to make its decisions and invest in you and your team to be the voice and get this level of this insight that you're producing. So just thinking about how you built that appetite, built that understanding, got that education, and got the organization to the place it's at now.
Sure. So I think a couple of things happened. The political leadership made a decision when they came on board to that salami slicing in the local authority was no longer an option. That's not going to work. We needed something new, innovative, and a desire for transformation and innovation, which is not just let's just cut things down. So that was one key driver. The second key driver was our executive leadership kind of translated that into, well, what are the components that we need in the organization that can enable all of that? So we probably ought to get better at data and insight, and we probably ought to get better at lots of other things. And so the political leadership having the will and the vision, the executive leadership saying, we acknowledge that there's a gap here. We don't quite know how what the end answer is, but we acknowledge there's a gap. Let's try to fill it with something or someone in my case. And so the one thing I'm incredibly grateful for to my directors and my employer is that the first line of my job description says that this person is given the mandate to positively disrupt the way the council thinks. And that's the first line of my job description, and I absolutely love it because it gives me legitimate authority to do exactly that. So those are the kind of those sort of three foundational things that really enabled it. And I think what's really great about my team as well is that we also understand that we are experimenting and we're not going to get everything right. We're playing the long game as well, but also we've got to produce impactful wins that either look at efficiency gains or improved outcomes for residents in a safe culture and environment where it's okay if we've missed a trick on something, but actually if the longer term gain is still there, we'll continue with it. And so creating that culture of safety, that culture of experiment, that culture of making sure we're laser focused on outcomes for residents is very much my job, and what I'm happy, real privileged to work with very smart people for.
Amazing. Well, I think that's a nice summary. You've done a sterling job there, and I know you spend time talking to other councils in London and wider about the work that you're doing. I think everyone should listen to that, and indeed people outside the public sector could learn a lot from how you've approached this. So I really appreciate your time, Pye. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been excellent and fantastic to listen and to talk to you.
It has been a real pleasure, Jason. Thank you for having me, and I hope we can get to do it again and get through some more stuff as well. No, it's been great. It's been really, really great to talk.
Great, and maybe we can do that in person rather than over a video call as
Definitely,
well.
definitely.
Brilliant. All right, well, thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you again soon.